It is WrestleMania week. Raw, NXT, SmackDown, Stand and Deliver, WrestleMania Night 1, WrestleMania Night 2. The first question is, who stands and delivers? We'll talk about all of that and more. This is WrstlXtra. Yo. This is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, always joined by my tag team partner. Say his name, he shall appear. The omnipresent man, the professor, known as Gerard Bonner. Gerard, it is WrestleMania week. I know your week's busy already, as it is. Let's first talk about what's happening this week on our TV screens. It is a Tuesday. Let's start with NXT. Stand and Deliver. We found out last week that Jaida Parker has found herself in a fatal four-way match for the NXT Women's Championship. We were talking last week, and we were, it was just before Jaida was set to take on Jordynne Grace. Mm-hmm. And we were like, maybe it'll be a thing where, one of them, they end up in a match together at Stand and Deliver, or Jaida ends up in the ladder match for the NXT Women's North American Championship. If she does, she should win, blah, blah, blah. Here's my question. Again, I'll make the statement. We need to stop predicting NXT because we get it wrong all the time. Anyway, which is great in itself.
Yeah, that's great.
But here's my question. Is it better for her to be in this fatal four-way match than it is for her to be in the NXT Women's North American Championship ladder match?
Tricky question. And it's tricky because it depends on your perspective of what better looks like, right?
Right.
So on one hand, if you think that better is her leaving with a championship, then maybe you think she should be in the North American title picture, because it seems almost a lock that she would be the women's North American champion. If you're talking about her being mentioned in the upper echelon of the women's division, then her being in this women's title match is a win. I mean, you think about it. She's now considered to be amongst the top 4 women in NXT. And the other 3 happen to be the champion, Stephanie Vacour, the former champion, Julia, and one of the longest reigning Knockouts women's champion, Jordynne Grace. So that's incredibly amazing company for her to be in. So it really does depend on what that looks like. Now, if we're asking the question, does she win the championship or does she need to win the championship? For this to be a win, I think she's already won. She's already won. This is somebody who, in June was in the North American title picture in that inaugural ladder match. But now to be in this particular space, to be considered championship material, to have gotten a women's championship shot and be deemed worthy enough to get another one at Stand and Deliver, it's a massive win for Jaida Parker. And I know most would probably consider her the underdog of these 4, but that could be all the more reason why Jaida Parker could leave as the women's NXT Women's Champion.
We've seen that kind of play out in history before in the WWE. When I think it was when Chris Jericho ended up winning and beating Triple H and The Rock on the same night when he wasn't supposed to be that guy,
right?
But he was,
right.
Rey Mysterio's whole championship career has been the same. Kofi Kingston. Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, like there were so many that
you could even argue Indy Hartwell a couple of years ago at Stand and Deliver.
Indy, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
It's not impossible at all. And I think I definitely agree with you in terms of the position that she finds herself in now is definitely a win. You've got to think, we've said it on multiple weeks on this show, and I'm sure many people have said it on multiple shows in over the last year or so, that when it comes to this NXT women's division, the top echelon is Stephanie, Julia, and Jordynne Grace.
Yes.
The only other person that is kind of, we would argue, born and bred NXT that's up there is Roxanne Perez.
Correct. With
the current crop that's there at the moment. So for Jaida to find herself there right now for Stand and Deliver, when most people would say Stephanie's either going to face Jordynne Grace or return.
Yeah.
No one in their right mind really thought, unless you're a massive Jaida Parker fan, no one in their right mind really thought Jaida was going to be in the championship match at Stand and Deliver. Nobody.
Yeah. I agree.
It's not to say that she wasn't good enough, but to stack her up against the rest of the names that we've mentioned and the ladies that she will be facing, you wouldn't have thought so. You wouldn't have thought so. You'd be like, yeah, she can maybe a few months.
Right.
Not right now. So for her to be where she is, for me, is definitely a better place than for her to be in the NXT North American Championship ladder match. If she did, as we were saying last week, for me, it would have been a shoo-in, or it should have, kind of been set that she would win that match. But for me, this is actually a better place for her to be, because she could still go on to be a North American champion.
For sure.
It can still happen. For her to be put in this place where there's this fanfare and hoo-ha over all the other three women for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's even before they even signed with NXT.
Right.
For Jaida to be there in that same spot on the biggest night of the year.
Yeah. Massive.
It's crazy. And I guess, for the most part, you already mentioned that, she's the underdog in this. Out of the four women, she's the underdog. But it kind of helps me to go on to the other match as well, that being Jevon, Trick Williams, and Obafemi for the NXT Championship. In that match, Jevon Evans is also the underdog. But it feels as though, it's starting to feel as though he's an underdog for a reason, and we're going to see a bit of a shock play out, because going back to last week as well, the three of them took on Dark State.
Yes.
In a 6-man tag team match. And it was mentioned on commentary so many times. It was made obvious. It was clear. Jevon Evans was the man of the match in that match. Kept the team together, was the glue, as it was mentioned on commentary so many times. And yes, unfortunately, he took the pin. But that was only because the other two guys decided they were going to, have it out with each other and whatever. So it feels as though these guys are so distracted with other things, whereas the young, supposedly naive, and inexperienced Jevon Evans, even though he's been wrestling longer than both of them put together anyway.
Right.
Seems to be the one that has the focus in order to come out on top, could possibly end up becoming the NXT champion at Stand and Deliver. How real does that feel to you?
Well, I said it when it was rumored that he'd be in this triple threat match. I said Jevon Evans is leaving Stand and Deliver as the NXT champion. I am standing 10 toes down on this. I firmly believe it. For so many reasons, all the reasons that you've stated. And, you think about, where does NXT go right now? Stand and Deliver has become the place, like WrestleMania, where it's kind of the end of one season, the start of another. And so you look at the massive year that has been Obafemi, the massive year that has been Trick Williams. Trick Williams, the coronation of Trick Williams arguably happened at Stand and Deliver last year. with him getting that main event win over Mello. Still hard to believe that was just a year ago. It feels like it was longer. But you look at Trick Williams and what he's done. He's had 2 stints as the NXT champion. He's a former North American champion, Iron Survivor winner. You look at Obafemi, very similar trajectory, Iron Survivor winner, NXT champion, NXT longest reigning North American champion. Honestly, a win for them at Stand and Deliver does nothing. They've both won at Stand and Deliver before. Oba won defending the North American Championship at Stand and Deliver last year. We just mentioned the main event win for Trick Williams. Jevon Evans is the one that stands to have the moment. If you want to kick off WrestleMania weekend right, if you want to have the people talking before we listen, so people who follow me on Facebook, WrestleMania season, it's my favorite time to post because being the church kid that I am, admittedly I am, everything turns into convocation conversation. Right. So this is the youth service. It's the youth service that's the predate to the main show, right? Before we get to the main and the youth service, the kids always kill it. It's always fire. It's always energized. I'm telling you, Jevon Evans will set Vegas on fire, winning the NXT championship. Doesn't matter who he pins. Think about it. He's already been tested, right? Over the summertime, he had his first NXT title match in a fatal 4-way, the one that, what's his name, ended up winning? Ethan Page, right? And so he's been dibbling and dabbling around the NXT title picture for a little bit. Had an opportunity to become #1 contender, and that got changed, right? All of these kinds of things that have been happening, which have proven they can trust Jevon. Jevon ends up in a war with Ethan Page, that goes for a while and ends, of course, back in Madison Square Garden at Roadblock in a great street fight. This kid has got the goods. And again, all of the emphasis on him being 20 years old, you made the great point. He's got more wrestling experience than anybody else in that match. So he's called the young OG for a reason.
Right.
And I believe that this Saturday, we will call Jevon Evans the new NXT champion. He's going to do it. And I'm telling you, you want the people talking? That's how you get them talking to start off WrestleMania weekend. Wow.
And you know what? It feels very real. It doesn't even feel as though everything that's been mentioned, everything that we've talked about, everything that's been said and purposely said over commentary and whatnot and all the rest of it doesn't feel as though it's a ruse. It feels like they're setting the stage. As you were talking about his path over the last year, it's crazy because as you're saying everything, you know exactly who it reminds me of.
Who's that?
Jey Uso.
There it is.
Jey Uso. The whole, being so close to winning the big time and having opportunities and all this kind of stuff and not quite hitting it. Then this whole thing of, a crisis of confidence and having to, overcome the odds and whatnot. And then being the fan favorite. Because as popular as both Oba and Trick are, they're kind of in that space of they're not baby faces, they're not heels. Whereas Jevon, straight baby face.
Absolutely.
And as soon as he comes out, the crowd are cheering him. You know what? They're getting from 100% of the crowd are cheering him. And that's it. So it feels very, very similar to a Jey Uso type of scenario. And again, we talk about experience. Jevon's got that experience. Jay's obviously coming with experience and stuff like that as well. So it feels very, very similar and as though I don't think I can't say that it's been purposely done. But at the same time, it feels very, very similar. And I feel as though both guys are going to come away with championships before the end of WrestleMania weekend.
It's going to be a great weekend.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. Let's go back to the match real quick. We talked about, obviously, they faced Dark State.
Yeah.
What did you make of their in-ring debut as a unit, and maybe even as some of them individually?
Dark State got the treatment like the Shield. In the sense of, the Shield showed up in 2012, 2013, and people went, who is this? They didn't know who Seth Rollins was. They didn't know who Dean Ambrose was. They certainly didn't know who Roman Reigns was. But these guys get propelled into the main event picture quickly. That's what we're seeing with Dark State. These three, technically four of them, showed up. And when you can put the main event of your biggest card of the year on notice, just the fact that they were in that match was significant. But they dominated the match. And you could say, sure, it's because of lack of teamwork between Jevon, Trick, and Oba. But the fact still remains, those three are fighting for your biggest championship in NXT on this brand. And Dark State went right through them and made it look easy. Made it look easy. So I think it's an amazing moment for all of them. Saquon Sugars, as we talked about before, special talent, very special talent. The charisma that he has, his in-ring work, the swag, like all of it. It's one of those things that you cannot deny. And what I love about what's happening with Dark State is in the side of the division, the men's division in NXT, which has been lacking lately. We've talked more about the NXT women's division, and that's carried that show, and who would become challengers for the NXT championship. Well, enter any and all of Dark State, because that's what you're looking at. Think about Cutler James. For those who are watching LFG and you see Cutler James on LFG, what Dark State has done for him is it's given him a personality. Right. And so I don't know if this means that he won the competition or not. But what I do know is he's been propelled to the top of the card by being a part of this group. These four guys, this is the shot in the arm that NXT needed. You throw in Ricky Saints, and you throw in, the rise that we've been seeing of Sean Spears, and all of a sudden we've got some men in the singles division for NXT who can challenge and who can make some noise. I'm liking this. I'm liking this. So Dark State was necessary as a group and as individuals. And what they proved last week, they belong in the main event picture.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think we definitely saw what they were about. It kind of helped us even more to understand who they are and all the rest of it as well. How they are individually, how they are as a group. That finisher is crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. That finish is wild.
Yeah.
And we also know that Tony D and the family will come up against them as well. In another, I think, is it another 6-man?
Sounds like it.
Tonight.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
Something like that. So, and as you said, it adds numbers and names to the men's division in NXT.
Yeah.
And what was beautiful also of last week that helped portray that as well is when Ricky Saints came out to celebrate him winning the NXT North American Championship, called out Ethan Page, but then Lexus King comes out.
Wesley came out.
Wesley came out. Eddie Thorpe comes out. All these guys come out and want to challenge Ricky Saints for the North American Championship. We'll see a fatal four-way to determine who Ricky Saints faces at Stand and Deliver. But and even with Sean Spears saying, it's fine, I don't need that championship. It was all about you guys talking about, his group, the Calling, and pushing Izzy Dame. She's now in this NXT North American Championship women's ladder match. The boys with Brooks Jensen and Nico
Vance,
forming as a tag team. They showed out in their tag team match. It's now feeling as though we're starting to kind of fix some of the problems that we were having in NXT with the men's side of things. The women's side, the problems are good problems.
Yeah.
That's the problem. The problem is with problems.
Yes.
But yeah, everything else is kind of seeming to play out nicely and work out. It's going to be interesting to see who comes out to face Ricky Saints for the NXT North American Championship at Stand and Deliver. Speaking of this whole weekend, and even with the matches that we know of for Stand and Deliver for WrestleMania over the weekend, a lot has been said about multi-person matches. I think Shawn Michaels was asked the question. I can't remember who it was by, but there was something he was saying about rewarding the talent that have been showing out over the last year or so, the last few months, and all the rest of it. And multi-person matches just kind of seem to help do the job. Now, I feel for me in NXT we're very used to it already. So to me, see multi-person matches isn't an issue. I mean, the North American Championship, Obafemi was in 3-4 of those when he was champion. The whole of Wesley's run was basically multi-person matches, 6 people, 4 people, 8 people, whatever it was. So multi-person matches for me in NXT isn't an issue. But the talk is at WrestleMania. But what's weird to me is there are about, I think, 10, 12, 13 matches that have already been confirmed. Aside from tag team matches, there are only 3 of them that are multi-person matches. Why are we making a big thing of multi-person matches? Can you make sense of it?
I believe it was Triple H who was in an interview yesterday or the day before, and he talked about how the feedback from the internet isn't real, right? Like it's not a reflection of what the people at large are thinking. And I think this is one of those cases. And one of the things that I think about that is there needs to be, obviously, in all of these companies, some way to vet these concerns from the internet so that we're not looking at all of them as equals, because many of them are unfounded. So for me, I think it's problematic for fans to get upset about multi-person matches when not a fan has been in a multi-person match, right? You've not been in a multi-person match to know whether it's more difficult for you or not, right? You have no idea. Here's the thing. If wrestlers are, if the goal is for wrestlers who have worked hard all year to get a place at WrestleMania, and they do, we should be satisfied, right? Like it's not inside of an Andre the Giant Battle Royal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not that. The matches make sense. All of the matches have some degree of story to it. What's surprising to me is, as of yet, we don't have a ladder match at WrestleMania. The closest thing we have is Stand and Deliver. So, you don't have that kind of intrigue with multi-man matches. We think last year there was, if my memory serves me correctly, 7 or 8 tag teams inside of that ladder match to try to separate the tag team titles with 2 sets of titles on the line, right?
Correct.
I don't recall people being up in arms about that. I think the internet just has a moment where let's find out what we're going to be upset about today. And, there's no real merit to it. Considering that, again, there are 3 triple threat matches, I think, at WrestleMania over the weekend.
2 triple threat and 1 fatal 4-way.
Okay, triple threat and fatal 4-way. So 3, and only one of them is not connected to a championship. That happens to be a main event. So I don't know. The answer is I can't make sense of it because it's a nonsensical issue and argument. There are other arguments that could be had potentially about the WrestleMania card. That isn't one of them.
And you mentioned the whole tag team thing. I think another complaint or another expectation, that we've had, and I've had the same, is that with the way the SmackDown tag team division has gone, we've been waiting for a multi-team match to take place at WrestleMania.
Yes.
It hasn't happened. There's still potential that it can, but it hasn't been announced. There's no,
Right.
there's nothing set in stone.
Mhm.
So would it be right for me to think that if that now becomes a thing, that's going to add to these people who are complaining about multi-person matches? I doubt it, because it's something that they've wanted and expected for the last 4 or
Right.
5 weeks.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't. For me, the only match that we can possibly argue in terms of being a multi-person match is possibly the women's championship match,
Mhm.
because of the way kind of Rhea Ripley's kind of inserted herself, the way
Mhm.
Bianca actually qualified in order to get her to earn
Yes.
her opportunity.
Yes.
So that's probably the only one. But for the rest of them, again, it all makes sense. Again, there's storyline to it.
Yeah.
With the Intercontinental, with the Fatal 4-Way, I'm not even waiting to see who wins the match. I'm waiting to see the blow up between Finn Balor and Dominic
Yes.
Mysterio.
Yes.
That's what
Yes.
I'm waiting for.
Yes.
The championship doesn't even matter to me in this match.
That's hilarious.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm actually excited for all of it. So yeah, again, I don't completely understand the issue, and it's, as you said, compared to last year as well,
Mhm.
and previous years, very
Yes.
recent previous years. We've had the Andre the Giant thing where it just felt like you're just throwing people in just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Whereas the last few WrestleManias, it definitely has felt a lot more like people are being rewarded for their hard work.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if we end up, say if it was, 12 matches over the 2 days,
Yeah.
there's no way there's only going to be 24 people who deserve to be in one-on-one matches, 12 one-on-one
Sure.
matches, if we're going to put it like that.
Right.
So there always has to be some kind of multi-person.
Yeah.
And even with this multi-person, you're leaving out so many other people who you can
Yes.
argue possibly could have fit in somewhere. And because I think for a while we also thought that the Intercontinental was probably going to, feature 6 men.
Yeah.
Ludwig Kaiser,
Mhm.
Sheamus, Pete
Sure.
Dunne, what I
Yeah.
mean? Those guys as well. And
Yeah.
again, it would have made sense for the whole story as well, not
Mhm.
just let's throw him in.
Right.
So yeah, as you said, it's we're in this place where every day, probably once a week, we find the
Yeah.
newest thing to be upset about. We jump
Yeah.
on the bandwagon, we make it into something that it doesn't need to be.
Right.
But then when you break things down, you're like, yeah, this is 3 matches out of 12.
Right. Right. What are we arguing about?
Why is there a problem?
Yeah.
And then look at the matches themselves. Tell me what part doesn't make sense. Go to
Right.
NXT where most of the matches are multi-person, and
Yeah.
still tell me where it doesn't make sense.
Right. Right.
Sometimes I just don't understand what
Nope.
people are doing with their fingers and thumbs
No.
on their
Doesn't
phones.
make sense. Does not make sense.
It's crazy to me. It's crazy
Yeah.
to me. With all that said, I'm gonna throw a question at you, put you on the spot. Of everything happening over the WrestleMania weekend, including NXT, the 2 nights of WrestleMania,
Yeah.
what match are you most excited for? What single match are you most excited for?
Let's see. There are. You said one. I can probably pick a couple. I know for sure. I am excited about the triple threat women's match with Bianca, Rhea, and Io. I think all 3 of them certainly deserve to be in that match. I'm actually really torn because on one hand, I'd like Io to be able to land a massive victory in defense of this championship.
Yep.
I don't like the idea of that being at the expense of Bianca's undefeated streak. So something has to give there, and Rhea is always the wild card. So I'm interested in that. I'm very interested in Naomi versus Jade.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the best story of anything happening at WrestleMania this weekend. Brilliantly told story. I think both of them have the opportunity to really launch well from this. I think Naomi is going to win and has to win. But I'm loving how this is going to come into play and how they're going to roll with this. The other one that I'm really, really interested in, admittedly, is Punk, Roman, and Seth. And that's because this whole Paul Heyman situation has added another layer. And the fact that it's ending Saturday night, they're going to end it. This is not going to just end with someone getting a pinfall. Something of great significance is going to happen between these four people. Where Heyman will lie and how he will get there, I don't know. But the fact that they spent a good portion of SmackDown chronicling his relationship with Punk. And then we've had chronicles on his relationship with Roman. Something is up. And I don't know what it is, but I will say this. Bold prediction. Paul Heyman leaves with the winner.
Oh, for sure.
Whoever the winner is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
Whoever the winner is.
Oh,
and
of course.
I just shudder to think what happens to the WWE. Because really, when this match was made, I did not see it as a main event.
Mm-hmm.
3 big stars. I just didn't see it as a main event. When they said it was a main event, suddenly everything switched. And this match is very interesting. And of course, I gotta, Cody Cena. It's a match that writes itself. And to me, the prospect, because I feel like it's a guarantee, John Cena's winning the world title, and he's going to take it and do something crazy with it, because we've lived in a year of bliss for WWE. Right. Cody is the world champion. It's been a year of bliss. That's going to change at the hands of John Cena. And we're going to get some dark days, and it's going to be fun.
It's going to be very, very interesting. I, too, am very much intrigued by the triple threat.
Yes.
Roman, Punk, and Rollins. When we had this whole fanfare of, this promise that CM Punk had, and then we found out it was for Paul Heyman to be at his side for the match, I was like, huh?
Right.
What?
Right. I expected much more.
Yeah.
Much more. Yeah.
Championship match, or guaranteed to something, or blah, like something. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
But now I'm like, okay, this now that they've given it more gravitas, and now that they've kind of added this whole thing with Seth now feeling as though Paul Heyman owes him something, and because he saved him or not attacked him when he could have, and all this sort of thing. I'm just like, wow. It adds the most amount of intrigue. It shows you Roman looking vulnerable. It shows CM Punk kind of almost feeling as though is untouchable. And yet you've still got the scheming, conniving architect that is Seth Rollins looming in the background, hovering over both men. To think some of the possibilities is outrageous. It's outrageous. The other triple threat, we mentioned it already. For me, that I'm very, very intrigued by, in terms of how it plays out, what it means for each person after the result, is the NXT Men's Championship match. It offers so many different outcomes and aspects, and things that follow on afterwards. And it's unpredictable. Either man could win. It would make sense for either man to win. Whoever takes the pin, what does that mean? Like, there are so many things that can happen, and ways it could go. And again, I think it probably is another triple threat with the women's, as you mentioned as well, for the exact same reasons you said. I don't ever really want to see anyone as a transitional champion.
Right.
I don't really want to see Io lose. But again, I don't want Bianca's streak to disappear. So does that mean, with that said, the ideal scenario for us in terms of how we're seeing this, or how we want it to play out, is Io wins because Rhea gets pinned.
Right.
But Bianca doesn't. She can still argue the streak, like, because she hasn't been pinned.
Right.
But how do we get to that? Like, and then what does that do for Bianca? does Jade or Naomi get involved in some way, or the next day, or the following week? Oh, yeah, the triple threats, the multi people matches are the best ones.
They are.
They really are. Again, as I mentioned already with the Intercontinental Championship match, like I don't care about the result of the match. I just want to see the result of the friendship.
Yeah.
And then what that means. So wow, it's gonna be very, very, very interesting to see how it all plays out over that week. Before we move on from WrestleMania week, as I said at the start of the show, you're gonna be very busy this week. With all the different things happening. Just give us a rundown, some of the highlights, some of the most interesting things that you'll be involved with over this WrestleMania week in Vegas.
For sure. So WrestleMania week is going to be very, very special for a lot of reasons. I'll be a part of 2 shows this weekend, which I'm excited about. It kicks off on Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. On the East Coast with Ashe Vegas, Ashe Wrestling's debut during Mania week and in Vegas. And I think it's going to be something super, super special. Something like 7 matches happening here, a lot of wonderful people involved. We will have a massive 10-man all-star tag team match. Team Darius Lockhart, which is going to be nuts. You've got Darius Lockhart, Jonathan Gresham, the gifted one, Yaya, Darian Bankston, and Ian Maxwell going up against Team Darius Carter, which is captained by the Ashe men's champion, Darius Carter, frontman Jasi, Ashton Starr, Movie Mike, and the debuting Kenny King. So that's, it's going to be very, very special. We will have an international flair as TNA's Leon Slater will be taking on Man Like Doris, which I'm just like,
it's crazy. Tag team partners.
Yeah, that's going to be nuts. That's going to be nuts on so many levels. Women's action will see Jaida Stone taking on La Rosa Negra, which I think will be very, very special. Also, we'll have the Pan-African World Championship on the line as Shug D takes on JTG. On top of several other matches that will be happening, we've got a very special announcement that will involve Faye Jackson and TNA Hall of Famer Jazz. So I'm excited to see what that could be. Also, we'll have Big Swole and the amazing comedian Kev on stage. He will be there for commentary, which I think is going to be nuts. I'll be hosting along with Goldman. So it's going to be an incredible, incredible afternoon. For those who have never had a chance to witness Ashe Wrestling live, this is your opportunity. And for those who cannot get there, it will be streamed live at AsheWrestling.com. So you can definitely make it a note to actually get locked in with that today if you can't make it, so that you can be a part of what I think is going to be a very, very special moment in the history of Ashe. And then, of course, later that night, I will be a part of a great card called Sin City Burn. It's put together by Fighting Evolution Wrestling, which will feature a lot of the stars from All Caribbean Wrestling. 5 big matches will be involved in that. Some of those matches include Zicky Dice, outlandish Zicky Dice taking on the Pope, Elijah Burke, who of course is the All Caribbean Wrestling champion. We talked about Kenny King. He will be taking on the returning Marty Scurll, which I think is going to be a wild match. Rios de la Sangre takes on Sydney Akeem. That's going to be one to watch for sure. Danny Limelight takes on JTG, and AJ Francis will take on Leroy Jones. And speaking of AJ Francis, he's a part of the Ator Invitational at Ashe. 5 big men, as they say, meaty men. You know the rest of that. It's gonna be special, guys. It's gonna be very, very special. So Ashe is at 11 a.m. Pacific. Sin City Burn will be at 11 p.m. Pacific. So it's gonna be a full day for me. I'll be doing commentary there. So it's gonna be a great time. I'm looking forward to it. And the thing about Mania weekend, especially now, is it's not just about the events and the
No.
opportunities to connect with other wrestlers. It's about connecting with other wrestling personalities. And
Mm.
for what we get to do, certainly in the commentary space, in the podcasting space, I'm really looking forward to connecting with a lot of my colleagues there. And you know, we've worked together, obviously virtually, for a while. This is the one time of year where we get to come together, hang, take pictures, share stories, have some great experiences. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll take this time also just to operate in a space of gratitude. You know, like, I don't think people understand WrestleMania week is a massive week, and most people go to attend. Few get the privilege to work. To get the opportunity.
True.
Last year was my first opportunity to work, thanks to All Caribbean Wrestling. This year, I get to work with All Caribbean Wrestling and Ashe Wrestling, two of my favorite promotions. So it's a huge honor, and I'm extremely grateful to all of the powers that be for allowing these kinds of moments to happen. Darius Lockhart, JB Cool, Mark Henry, all the people. I am grateful that I get to use my talents and skills during the biggest week of the pro wrestling calendar. What people don't understand is literally hundreds of thousands of fans will be present, many of whom have not had a chance to experience these products before. So they go not just for Mania, but, you know, many haven't had a chance to be at Ashe Wrestling. Many haven't had a chance to experience All Caribbean or Fighting Evolution. So it's great that we get to introduce these products to all of these fans. So it's going to be a great week, and I'm extremely grateful and excited.
And I think for me, that's the beauty of WrestleMania week and what it's turned into over maybe the last maybe 10 years or so, is this whole thing, an opportunity for the smaller promotions or some of the indie promotions to get a chance to, you know, showcase themselves towards a bigger audience, towards, you know, and I guess it's not so much the casual fans that go to Mania. You kind of get a mix of both.
Sure.
But at the same time, you'll still get a massive amounts of people that are attending or are there over the weekend or over the week that don't know Ashe even existed. Wouldn't even know something like a Bloodsport existed. You know, Joey Janela's Spring Break and all these other things that can happen within this week. And you got Wale Mania that happens as well. And all these different things and different ways for people to either showcase themselves as wrestlers and performers. But then also as yourself, you know, doing broadcasting and podcasting and stuff like that. People to connect with other wrestling fans and spend a week just chatting and talking and deliberating about wrestling, when usually, I know for me, it's something that's very scarce on your week to week. You know, in your everyday environment, it's not something that you get to do, or definitely not as often as you would want to do. So it offers that space as well. So it's interesting, it's intriguing, it's beautiful that everyone kind of gets to come together in that space and do things and that's going to happen, and get excited for the matches, the shows, the outcomes, the stories, the people, the fans, all of that stuff. And it's crazy. It's crazy. And I'll be watching it from a TV screen. Hey,
it's all good. It's all good. It'll be very comfortable for you.
It's exactly. Yes. I was literally going to say the same thing. You know, it can be exciting, but at the same time, you know, in your space, especially with what you're doing and stuff, you know, it can be very extremely tiring, extremely stressful at the same time. So it's the good and bad, you know, kind of mixed in together. But at the end of the day, you know, it's an experience, it's stories, as you said. You know, there's reason to be grateful. You know, to be in your position and in your space. You know, as we said, you know, we've talked about NXT, we've talked about WWE. It's the biggest week of the year for those promotions. But as I said, you know, other promotions and independent promotions get to showcase themselves in that space as well. But also, AEW are very much on the mindset of let's make the most of this as well. They have their what are they calling it again? Spring breakout.
Spring breakout, yeah, spring breakout
happening throughout the week. So I believe it's Dynamite, and then Collision's actually on Thursday as opposed to Saturday because of the NBA playoffs. And some of the matches that we're expecting to see and play out are about to be nuts. The biggest one I want to talk about today, of course, is Mercedes Moné versus Athena. Is it the semi-final?
Yes.
Semi-final of the Women's Owen Hart tournament. We talked about the possibility of these two clashing about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Did you expect it to be in the semi-final of the competition or in some other way? Is this the best way for these two to come together for the first time under an AEW banner?
Is this the best way? Absolutely not. Like, what? So let me get this straight. You're going to get the longest reigning TBS champion and arguably the most popular woman in your company to go against the longest reigning champion in Ring of Honor's history, male or female. And you're going to give it to us for free. In the semifinals of a tournament that's supposed to see the winner battle the world champion at your biggest event of the year. Something about this doesn't make sense at all. And I think it speaks to the larger challenge that has come relative to AEW programming. You know, should we get this match? Yes, we should get this match. Should we get it embedded in a tournament? No, we should not. This match should have actually happened. I don't know. Maybe you have it happen at Double or Nothing. It's probably better to have it happen at an event where you're trying to fill up 40, 50,000 seats. I don't know. All in Texas. Stands to make sense to me. Why we get it on this particular episode of Dynamite, where you know there's going to be limitations, where you know there will be at least one commercial break. What are we doing? I don't understand. So I don't think this was the best way we could have gotten it. Somebody's going to end up taking a loss unnecessarily that honestly won't mean anything, right? I think either Mercedes or Athena ultimately wins the tournament because that's what makes sense. But to have them go through each other to do that is crazy. Let's just think about this just optically. Take Mercedes and Athena out of it. You have a world champion in a tournament for the opportunity to fight another world champion. Shouldn't the world champion get automatic consideration because it's a title versus title situation? Why would you put them inside of a tournament and then expect us to view Ring of Honor and AEW on the same playing field? We can't, because you certainly would not have you didn't put Tony Storm in a tournament as the world champion to fight for something. You didn't put Jon Moxley in a tournament as the world champion to fight for the Continental title. So these are the things that don't make sense. And AEW needs to start allowing these things to. You cannot make these kinds of mistakes at all, but let alone during the biggest week of the wrestling calendar. I think there are other big matches you could have given us, and I get that, you know, this episode of Dynamite makes Dynamite the longest running, you know, weekly wrestling show on a TBS or TNT station. That's great, but for that to be the match. I don't understand. It just is not a good use of Mercedes or Athena, or the magnitude. They could have built this match. They could have put some things behind it. They could have given some story to it. We got a lackluster introduction to it because of Billy Stark showing up. And for this to be housed inside the Owen, I mean, I appreciate, you know, the Owen tournament, but it's a semifinal match. That should not be. At the least, it should have been the finals. At the least. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this.
I'm the same. You know, we could have had this match outside of the Owen.
Yeah,
Giving it a bit more, you know, a bit more substance, giving it a bit more story, you know, a bit more to it in terms of stipulation, maybe, or, you know, titles on the line and stuff like that. And that's still possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's still possible that this match is going to then, you know, probably be the real catalyst to taking us to them two going at each other at All in Texas, hopefully, possibly. But then with that said, it then begs the question, okay, so then you're telling me that if that is the case, if that is the goal, or, you know, if that is where we're going to, that then means either Statlander or Jamie Hayter is going to face Tony Storm at All in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that neither of them don't deserve it or not good enough. Of course, Jamie Hayter is a former AEW Women's Champion. Obviously, Statlander is a former TBS champion. Mm-hmm. They both have enough credentials in order to feel as though they could be. But at the same time, when you put it up against the longest two women who have now become longest reigning champions of the titles that they hold,
yeah,
kind of doesn't make sense. As we said before, when we kind of started seeing the possibility of Mercedes versus Athena, I said from the start, it should be a case where one of them ends up facing Tony Storm, or, you know, but first we have one of them lose their title to the other, and then that person faces Tony Storm. Whether they lose or win against Tony Storm is neither here nor there. It would still be a big enough match. But, you know, for me, the unfortunate part is it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I was going to say, I don't see Athena winning that match. Mm-hmm. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. No. I think the two biggest reasons is, one, because she's the longest reigning, you know, ROH champion of any division, gender, whatever it is. And her only loss in the last 2 years was in the Owen last year to Willow Nightingale. So for her to go into the Owen again and lose again would kind of not make sense for me, or wouldn't be right, basically. For Mercedes to go in, if Mercedes loses, that would actually make more sense. It kind of would have something to it. It would be nice. But at the same time, I think for me, there is this whole thing with Mercedes to where I feel as though it should definitely be Mercedes versus Tony Storm at All In to win the Owen, get the opportunity, turn the Owen and that whole thing into, you know, something with real substance, star power. The biggest match you could possibly put on is them two against each other. Nothing else is bigger. I don't think you could build anything else to be as big. You know, Tony has done all the stuff with Mariah May. You can't do anything more with that. And yeah, Mercedes is the only person left to kind of do anything with in terms of the women's division when it comes to Tony Storm, and make it feel as though it is a, you know, main event, biggest night of the year type of match. So it's difficult to understand and see how we get there, and, you know, whether it all makes sense. There's ways and means, but it's going to have some kind of, you know, consolations on the way. So I'm not too sure how we get there. Here's a question I wanted to ask, or a bit of a review that I wanted to do. Mercedes was on Collision the other day, just after seeing Athena win her match, and knows that she's going to face her in the semi-finals of the tournament. She mentioned she's been in AEW now just over a year since her first appearance, since signing, all the rest of it. It so happens, with Mercedes talking all money, it so happens that April is also the tax year
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of do a tax review um, on Mercedes' time in AEW. You know, has it fulfilled the purpose? Has it been the big business that it was supposed to be, in your eyes, in terms of bombs on seats, in terms of Mercedes herself, in terms of elevating the women's division, in terms of elevating AEW? What is your review on Mercedes' first year in AEW?
Okay. So I think the winner of Mercedes' first year in AEW is honestly Mercedes.
Mm.
I think she got to have finally an injury-free year post WWE.
Yep. Yep.
And in that injury-free year, she's gone undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
She has won she won obviously the TBS championship. She won the Strong Championship from New Japan. She won additional titles from Rev Pro and
Mm-hmm.
those types of things. She's had a chance to really do quite a bit, and she's had great matches.
Mm-hmm.
Great matches. I think she has started to become the Mercedes she's always believed she could be, and that we always believed she could be. This is who we expected to show up in New Japan a couple of years ago. You know, obviously you can't control injuries and things of that nature, but she's having, I think, the best run of her career right now, post WWE, without question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Has it done big business for AEW? I would say no. Their houses haven't increased. In fact, what they've done is probably the move that they should have done probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, which is said, we're going to smaller houses.
Yes.
Because if we go to smaller houses, it'll look better on TV. And it's been better. You know, they haven't had to tarp off places. You get now the full energy of that crowd in that more intimate space. Gives AEW a completely different look and feel. And I think that's a good thing. But that's not increasing the amount of butts and seats and things like that. Can we credit her arrival for, you know, the new deal they have with Max? I don't know. Can we credit her for the media rights deal? I don't know, because she wasn't the world champion. She elevated the mid-card belt, but I don't see where she elevated the women's division. I don't see that. I think people got to have matches with a legend, because most of the stars in AEW view her that way. So them getting to have matches with Mercedes is a good thing. They get to gain experience that they could not have gained against anyone else in AEW. So I think that's a win. And if that's considered elevating them, I can't say elevated, because we haven't created new stars.
Very true.
Willow Nightingale was a star before she got there. You know, do we consider Harley Cameron? Maybe that might be the one that, you know, Chris Statlander was already a TBS champion prior to. They had some great matches, but we already saw the stardom of Chris Statlander. Megan Bain never crossed paths with Mercedes. So I can't lay the credit of elevating the women's division on Mercedes. And I don't know that the women's division has been elevated with her being present. Just because you say a thing is true doesn't make it true. Just because she's been saying we've got the greatest women's division in pro wrestling, we all know better. You know, if you've got the greatest, and here's another measurement. If this is the greatest women's division in pro wrestling, then there should be more space than one match per episode for women's wrestling. You know, it was a big deal when a couple of weeks ago, women main evented Dynamite. That's crazy that just happened, right? Yeah, so I think the biggest winner of her entrance into AEW has been her. I'm not fully mad at that. She needed
No.
a massive year, and I think she had a great year. I do.
I agree with the sentiments as well. The person that comes out with the win is Mercedes. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
No.
That's just the facts. That's just the truth. That's just how it feels.
Yeah.
It looks. It seems. And as you said, that was important for her as well.
Yeah.
That was very, very important for her as well. As you said, last year she got injured. She probably would have signed a deal and whatnot, before that, or was definitely considering it. It definitely seemed that it was as though it was going to happen. Started out with New Japan. It was clear and obvious that she was going to make the transition to AEW eventually. Injury came in the way. It took her out for a while. And yeah, she's had great matches. She's had some great matches. We're seeing her, go to Japan often, or different promotions, or at least under New Japan banner with New Japan Strong, defending that championship. She's set to make an appearance and defend her Rev Pro, Undisputed British Women's Championship as well. I believe against Kanji next month.
Wow.
In London, or in the UK. She's got a triple threat match that she's having against Mina Shirakawa and
I think Azumi.
Azumi, that's the one. Azumi as well. So that's going to be interesting, of course. And she's doing this whole thing. She mentioned, I think at least 2 years ago, she wanted to travel the world and win championships here and there, and she's doing that, and that's perfect. That's brilliant for her. When it comes to AEW, has she made a change there? No.
Right.
No, I don't think she has. Maybe for the first few weeks, yes. There was complaints about the way that she was being portrayed or the way she was being used in terms of, positioned. Was she good enough on the mic? Was she, were there any stories going on and all this kind of stuff? And I think for me, the only story of any real substance was the first one with her and Willow.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else, again, great matches. Her and Statlander, amazing matches. Can't be faulted on that part. That can't be denied whatsoever. But in terms of making any difference to the women's division, certainly not.
Right.
I don't even think personally that she's really elevated the TBS championship either. No. I don't think she's done that. I don't think she's done that either. But in terms of what she's done and for her to look at herself in the mirror and say, what has Mercedes done for Mercedes? She can definitely be happy about that part.
Absolutely.
She can definitely be happy about that part. If she looks in the mirror or face to face with Tony Khan and says, what has Mercedes done for AEW? Tony will be like, well.
Yeah.
If she looks at some of the other ladies in the women's in the women's division, again, as you mentioned, some of them will be very grateful. The simple fact that they can say they had a match with Mercedes Moné, formerly Sasha Banks of WWE, NXT, still possibly the biggest female star in the game, or definitely one of in terms of fanfare and all that kind of stuff. So that part's great. But would a Tony Storm look at Mercedes and think, oh, you've helped me? Not in the slightest.
Right.
Tony Storm's helped Tony Storm.
That's right.
In the biggest way possible. Again, a couple of us can say that they've had run-ins and it's kind of helped them a little, maybe getting a bit of confidence. But Harley Cameron's probably, the only one that can say, okay, there's been some sort of a lasting or some kind of ongoing thing that's happened since they first locked heads. But has it made her a bigger star? Yeah, on a comedy level. Again, not a bad thing, but it is that. Has that elevated Harley Cameron to a higher position on the card? No, it hasn't.
True.
It hasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, with all of those things said, and this is not to say that all the things that she hasn't done is necessarily a negative. This is just the facts.
Right.
This is just the facts. Mercedes has done great things for Mercedes, and it was needed. It was necessary. But I don't think either as well that there are we can pick out any name in any women's division and any promotion, and not one of them will tick every single box.
Oh, for sure.
No one does. No one will. No one does.
Yeah.
Some come very close.
For sure.
Some have done better than others. Some have done more than others in that respect. But no one's going to tick every box, and Mercedes just hasn't ticked every box. Right. But in terms of Mercedes' tax year, she's only gained and made profit for Mercedes.
Yes, for sure.
It's as simple as that. I mean, again, not a bad thing, but just how it is. The last thing I want to talk about real quickly, we're still staying with AEW. We saw a few things play out. We were wondering, what was all of that about at Dynasty with the Bucks coming out and attacking Swerve and Hangman in two mindsets, whether he attacks Swerve or Moxley and blah, blah, blah. We got so many answers.
Yeah.
On Dynamite the following Wednesday. But still, so many questions still left to be asked, which is still a very, very good thing. Keeps us intrigued. It keeps us involved. It keeps the whole thing relevant. But what was interesting was that there seems to be the possibility, whether it happens on an episode of Dynamite, whether it happens on a PLE or whatever it is, we're going to see the Bucks and Okada somehow in some way take on Swerve, Omega, and funnily enough, Hangman Adam Page. Obviously, the harder part to imagine is Swerve and Page on the same page. Pun intended.
Right.
Pun intended. How do you see that playing out? Do you see that kind of happening on an episode of Dynamite? Do you see it happening at Double or Nothing, which is coming up soon? How do you see that one playing out?
It seems like it should be a match on Double or Nothing. Seems like it should have been, but so should Mercedes versus Athena. So it's hard to predict. This could show up on Dynamite or Collision. It could be on Collision, actually.
No.
That could happen. That's the unfortunate part. It's like the big money matches don't end up where big money matches are supposed to be. I mean, do you remember when they gave us Bryan Danielson versus Okada on Dynamite for the world title? It was like, what are we, and like an Iron Man match or something, like, what are we doing? So I don't have confidence that a match like this would not end up on Dynamite. The right thing, of course, would be to put it on pay-per-view. And I don't know if they'll get this right because they have a greater commitment to men's wrestling than women's wrestling. I'm not sure. But I do feel like this belongs on a pay-per-view. The stars are too big to just be given on a random episode of Dynamite. But again, but I like the concept is wild. And I think there's enough intrigue that people would pay to see, can Swerve and Hangman Adam Page end up on the same page? I mean, and then there's the whole Page Kenny Omega thing, former tag team champions, but how cool are they really? Then you're looking at the fact that all three are former world champions. And then we've never seen Kenny Omega and Swerve really interact like that before. So there's a lot of intrigue on that side of the table where this should be on a pay-per-view, and they should let this cook a bit. We've got several weeks before we get to Double or Nothing. Can they hold this out that long is the real question.
But does the 6-man tag happen on a quote-unquote lesser show in order for bigger stories to be told? So, for example, as you mentioned, the continuation of Swerve and Page, the dynamics between Omega and Page and the Bucks and all of that with the Elite and whatnot. There's been talk of Omega versus Okada to possibly unite the continental and international championships. Does the 6-man tag would it just be a catalyst for bigger stories moving forward?
It could be used that way. It just really depends on how they want to use it, but it certainly could be. The question would be, what would it lead to? What would be the major story coming from these 6 men? Would it end up being Okada Omega? Will it be Omega and Hangman versus the Bucks? Kind of another battle of the elite again.
Right.
Where does Swerve fit in all this, right? Do we end up seeing Swerve versus Okada or Swerve versus one of the Bucks? Or does it end up with Swerve versus Page again? So what ends up being the larger story and how will they spin that? That's something that I'd be intrigued to see if this 6-man tag team could lend itself to that, because I don't know that we necessarily need Hangman Adam Page, Swerve, and Kenny Omega to become a faction of some sort take on, we don't need that, but we've gotten that before, right? That's why it's hard to pull out. I mean, look at the Ops, for instance, right? Like, what? Okay, sure. All right, we'll go with it. We've had so many makeshift factions and makeshift tag teams, and they all need tag team names and stuff like that. That's par for course on AEW. So considering that's on brand with them, who knows where it could go? Like, I'm nervous that they're going to take this and make this the precursor for, their blood and guts show, where they now turn this, which it's like, okay, so who are the other 2 that you're going to add to this?
Right.
Is it necessary?
Right.
Is it necessary?
Right.
That's the question.
And that's the thing for me too. You mentioned that we've had so many makeshift. We've seen we recently saw the breakup of another one in rated FTR.
Right.
As you mentioned the Ops. We've kind of seen a breakdown of the learning tree as well. There have been so many that have become something and not turned into anything. Even Undisputed Kingdom are not Undisputed Kingdom anymore. Now the Paragon.
Right.
What?
Random.
There have been so many. You had MJF and 2 different factions that he had. What was it called?
One again? Was the Pinnacle and
Pinnacle. That's it.
Yeah,
and then you had the JAS and MJF trying to be part of the Hurt Syndicate, and I was like, lads, like, what are we? Can you just like hold a team together and make sense of it and make it feel real or something?
Right.
So it is a little bit worrying that there's a possibility of getting Swerve, Page, and Omega as some kind of trios team to then take on the Bucks and Okada, and then take on the Death Riders. And then someone takes on Moxley, and but where does everyone fit? And that's the hard part about this. And in a way, it's a good problem. In a way, you can see it as a good problem. So many guys who can, be seen as world champions or take on the world champion and all that kind of stuff, which is a good problem. But at the same time, it can be turned into a bad problem,
right? When
you don't know what the direction actually is.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we're possibly at the top end, or at least anyway. In the middle, they seem to kind of have some type of idea. But at the top end of it, like, who takes out Moxley? How do we get there? Whose turn is it? Whose chance is it? Where does Swerve fit in it?
Right.
Because he kind of feels, apart from him and Page, he kind of feels as though he's just there almost.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone else has the most amount of history and can go back 10, 20 years and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So again, it helps to add intrigue. It helps to, leave us with cliffhangers and questions and a reason to come back to the product and see what happens. Right. But it also adds a little bit of confusion to where you can't really make sense of it all. But we'll see what happens. I think the Swerve Omega thing is intriguing. First time we're kind of seeing them interact in a way. The other good part of it is to see that Swerve is, still up there with the upper echelon, I guess, of the AEW roster. And means something in the same way we, singing the praises of Jaida Parker being in the position that she's in. It's a very, very similar, very similar thing. Of course, Swerve is a former champion, adds to it all as well. What was intriguing was the conversation between Prince Nana and Paige in the locker room.
Yeah.
Interesting to see whether, Swerve has something to say about that or some kind of, response to that. Right. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens and how it plays out. But yeah, there's confusion, there's intrigue, and it's a bit what's going on. But this is what wrestling does for us, isn't it? It is what it is. With all of that said, I believe we've covered everything we wanted to cover today.
I think so.
Yep, this is WrstlXtra. You have been watching on the BWA YouTube channel. Gerard, tell the people where they can find you, especially this week. Again, let us know exactly where you're going to be and how we can find you.
Yes, of course, you can find me at Bonnerfied across all of the social spaces. This week, I will be in Vegas Thursday morning as part of Ashe Vegas. That'll be at the FSW Arena, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, which I think is 7 p.m. BST, and wherever else you fit in that. And again, you can watch that show live at AsheWrestling.com if you will not be in Vegas. But if you're in Vegas, come to the show. I love to meet you, take pictures and chat and all of the cool things. And then you will find me again 11 p.m. Pacific as part of Sin City Burn, courtesy of Fighting Evolution Wrestling in conjunction with All Caribbean Wrestling. And again, that also is happening at the FSW Arena there in Vegas. And then Friday, I'll be floating around, hopefully to be able to check out some of the things that are going on and to see you guys as well. So I look forward to seeing you there. Of course, Saturday, you can check me out as part of All Caribbean Wrestling's Saturday Night Vibe on Tempo Networks, 6 p.m. Eastern. If you missed last week's show, I had a special sit-down interview with our champion, the Pope. So definitely check that out. It was a lot of fun in-ring interview there to check out. So great things are happening all across the board. Also, in case you did not know, I am a part of the Nightmare Factory Student Showcase 17. That is now out. You can check it out on the Nightmare Factory's YouTube page. And it is always fun to be working with a WWE ID school. So that's a lot of fun. Great show, great opportunity for you to check out some of the brand new talents graduating from the Nightmare Factory as well. And then another episode of Southern Honor is available on IWTV. So we're putting in a lot of work, guys, and it's going to pay off. I'm certain of that. So again, follow me at Bonnerfied. And again, I hope to see you guys in Vegas this week.
Amazing stuff, man. Amazing stuff. Everyone's going to be busy this week. Everyone's going to find themselves watching Mania and all that good stuff, all the cool stuff as well. Guys, of course, you can catch me and all good things Black Wrestling on Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. Of course, catch us here next week, Tuesday. It's going to be episode 200. Phenomenal stuff. Episode 200, as well as, of course, the WrstlXtra After Mania. I like that. That sounds nice. That sounds nice.
It does.
WrstlXtra After Mania. I love that. I like that.
I like that a lot.
So catch us there. Catch us here on the BWA YouTube channel at 6 p.m. BST. I believe that's 1 o'clock EST. Something like that. And if if you don't catch us live, you can catch us at any time you want after the show comes off the air. Guys, thank you so much for joining us as always, and we will see you again next time. Take care, bro.